All right, next message was, and I seen this, and like I said from my last video, that the women and the children, we've always been under attack, but now it's out in the open, and they want it to be more acceptable and more like out. It's not in the shadows no more, right? So I saw two videos. One was a teacher. She was a student teacher. She was becoming a teacher. And then another teacher, she's been teaching in the school system, and then she was like, she's seen how ridiculous it was, and she finally got out. Now, I keep seeing these teachers come on this internet boohoo crying, talking about the high school kids can't read, and the kids can't read, and it's just so and then they're blaming the parents, and they're blaming the students. Now, I'm for one, I'm done with the gaslighting bullshit, because I seen this years ago. This is why I didn't want my kids to go to school. This is why I took my kids out of school. So I'm trying to make this quick. So one teacher, I'm not even gonna talk about the other girl, because this one, she basically said exactly what I already knew and already thought. She basically blew the whistle on the school system, or the school, the system, not the school system itself, but the teaching. She was going to school to be a teacher. Her teaching professor was teaching them how to teach children how to read. They took teaching kids how to read out of school system. They do not teach children how to read phonetically. They do not teach phonics. Now, when I became a mom, like me and my ex-husband found out he was dyslexic when he was 25. So before I became a mom, I learned about dyslexia. I didn't learn a lot about it, but I learned enough at the time, right? When I became a mom, I was very intentional, because I said there could be a chance that my kids are dyslexic. So I was very intentional about teaching them very young. Now, my children, I taught them phonics before they went to school. I taught them phonics when they were still attending school. My children were very advanced before they went to school. When they were in first grade, my daughter came home with a worksheet full of nonsense words. I went to that school the next day and went off. On top of me telling you that my daughter is dyslexic, you send her home with homework for nonsense words. And then she explains to me, talking about, oh, that's so that they can learn how to phonetically know the sounds of each letter. But I explained to her, these words don't make sense. So it doesn't matter that you're teaching her phonetics, but the words are not real words. So do you see how that's counterproductive? So I was like, you know what? This day last year in this school. Then the next year I took them to another school, and I'm not even gonna talk about that school right now, because like I said, the school system is trash. So the teacher goes on to say, they stopped teaching kids how to read phonics. You need to know phonics to know how to read. Okay? I don't know why I would have to say this. They stopped teaching kids how to read properly. Then she goes on to say the way they started teaching the kids was to give them sight words. And they have to memorize the words. So I'm like, do you see how this is the problem and why kids can't read? They made the kids slower on purpose. Now, people just say, oh, well, why? Okay, and this has been going on for years. Like I said, I recognize this with my niece. My niece is the beginning of Gen Z. She was born in 2001. My kids are the end of Gen Z. They're 2011. So one was at the beginning, one was at the end. I remember when my niece was going to school, and that's when they started doing that Common Core shit. So that's another reason why I was ahead of the game as far as educating my kids, because I'm like, the school system is not going to do it. This is why the kids cannot read, because they screwed them in elementary school and did not teach them. They were not hooked on phonics, okay? They don't know how to read because the school purposely made it so that they don't know how to read. And if they do know how to read, it's very basic reading, right? Not only because there's so many rules, and that's why they have to learn it so young. And they basically sabotage our children. Now, you ask why they sabotage the children. And this is a download that I got 2 years ago. And now I see what happened. What they did was they stunted the children very young. So by the time they are older, right? 18, 19, about to go into these colleges and all that. They want the children to be dependent on technology. They're going to be dependent on this chat GPT to fill in the gaps of what they missed when they were younger. Is that not what they do? Is not what they're doing? Is that not what they were promoting? They want transhumanism. They want the human and they want the machine to be codependent on each other. They want you to be human enough and they want you to be dependent on the technology for you to do what you need to do in this society. That's what they're doing. That's what it is. So if you're wondering why your kids can't read and this is that, it's the school system. It's not the parents that they try to blame it on. It's not the parents. I say, you know what, it is the parents too, because a lot of them just go along with whatever school does. And that's what I said. That's where I differ. I don't, and that's why I was a problem in school, because I question everything. That's why I used to get in trouble in school all the time, because I'm going to question things. Why are we learning this? Why are we learning this like that? Parents are not aware enough and they're not intentional enough to be involved in their kids' education. They feel since they're in school, the school knows what's good for their kid, so they just go along to get along. They just go along with the program. And then when the kid is 17, 18 years old and don't know how to read, they're like, what happened? Why are you not paying attention in class? Because you wasn't paying attention to their homework. Or the way some of these schools are, they don't even have homework. So you don't even know what the kid is learning. And that's why during the pandemic, so many parents started homeschooling, because they started seeing how bullshit the school system was. That the kids wasn't learning shit. That's what happened. And then another thing is, well, you know, I'll make that a next video. But that is the problem. They stunted these kids in elementary school because they stopped teaching children how to read. That is why they don't know how to read. They want the future generation to be dependent, codependent on technology. That is what they designed. They designed the whole generation to do this. The whole next generation is going to be dependent on AI to function properly in the next bit of society. That's what they wanted. That was a part of the design. Now, there's going to be kids like my kids and the ones that's homeschooling. Like I said, technology is not bad. But my children and me, we are not going to be dependent on technology. We're going to use it as a tool. That is what technology is supposed to be. It's supposed to be used as a tool, not to be codependent on, not to be dependent on, not to think for you, not to finish your sentences for you, not to come up with creativity for you. It's supposed to be a tool to help you, not to be the other part of your functioning. And that is what they designed it to do. So do with that what you will. Peace.